again. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Ron Daniels, president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, and we're delighted to welcome you to this important gathering, Gentrification, a State of Emergency Without Urgency in Black America. But before we begin our program, we just want to acknowledge that this is the 54th anniversary, the memorial of the martyrdom of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who was assassinated on this day in Memphis, where he was there working with sanitation workers, defending their right to work, and planning actually for a poor people's campaign where he was going to be fighting for an economic bill of rights. We should always remember that. It is also on this day, 55 years ago, that Dr. King orated on one of the greatest speeches in the history of these United States of America. Beyond Vietnam, a time to break silence at the Riverside Church, an incredibly powerful and impactful speech, which put him at odds with virtually everybody. He stood alone in challenging the war in Vietnam, including his own board and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Only the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss voted with him. And yet he was courageous enough and visionary enough to take that stance. So I just wanted to begin this gathering in that way to remember Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the events that we've held around gentrification and issues related to our Newark Model City Initiative have been around this time as a way of reflecting and remembering Dr. Martin Luther King. Well, we're going to begin our program this evening, and our program is based on an initial major conference which we held in 2019 at around the same time. This conference was an emergency summit on gentrification. It was an emergency summit because it is an emergency. We are experiencing the displacement of Black people and Black culture all across this country. And as a result of that, we in the Institute of the Black World 21st Century decided to call an emergency summit, and it was an amazing gathering hosted by the Honorable Ras J. Baraka in Newark, New Jersey. People came from all across the country, advocates, policy leaders, planners, representatives of mayors, faith leaders, labor leaders. It was an amazing gathering. And we left there with an action agenda, some action items. We also left with a resolve that we wanted to create a resource center to bring people together so that we could learn from each other about how to address this state of emergency in Black America. We also wanted to create a network of advocates and organizers all across the country so that we would be able to be in conversation with each other and to build out a force, really, to ensure that this nation is aware that it is a state of emergency. In philanthropy, where this issue does not seem to resonate very strongly, that it's a state of emergency. Unfortunately, because of COVID, and frankly, because we didn't have the resources in IBW, we lost some momentum. We weren't able to follow up in the way that we had planned to do. But tonight, because we are now better situated, and quite frankly, unfortunately, because the situation has not changed. In some ways, it may have gotten worse in terms of the decimation of our communities. We launch anew. We say the struggle continues. And so we are asking people to join the fight. We're asking you to identify people all across this country who are dealing with the issue of gentrification. And you can do that at any time by going to ibw21.org and signing up for this struggle. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the next period of time. Again, we have some amazing organizers who've been dedicated to working on this issue. But before we begin our meeting, our host is the Honorable Ras J. Baraka. He is running for political office. He's running to be mayor of the city of Newark again. And so he was not able to actually join us in person. But I did have an opportunity earlier today to ask the mayor if he would just share a few words with us about the importance of the struggle around gentrification to redress and address it, and to talk a bit about what's being done in Newark. So we now would like to just hear from the Honorable Ras J. Baraka.
I mean, it's incredibly important. We see what has happened around the country, particularly as homelessness and, the housing crisis looms and continues to grow, increase in rents and how it's expediting. We need to have a response and a plan as that stuff happens, as market forces raise the prices around the country. We have to have very deliberate and intentional kind of strategies to mitigate this for working people and poor people in these cities. One is, in terms of creating and a sense of urgency around building affordable housing, but also a sense of urgency about giving people livable wages and increasing people's wages so they can afford or be in tune with the rising costs of housing. Many people are paying more than 30–40% of their income on housing, which puts an undue burden on them. And so it just has to be addressed.
Well, we certainly appreciate the Honorable Ras J. Baraka, his policies on equity and inclusion, fighting for affordable housing, exclusionary zoning. He has really advanced some very, very important policies in that regard. One of our other key allies has been the National Urban League. Yes, the National Urban League, particularly under the leadership of Marc Morial, former mayor of the great city of New Orleans, where he courageously initiated a fight to blunt gentrification during his term. He has remained very vigilant and very strong in his advocacy to encourage mayors to do what they can do, because he believes that mayors can do more if they knew better and knew how to address it. And he has consistently wanted to urge mayors to be effective in this regard. So he too was not able to join us physically tonight, but he did send his greetings and send a message on his behalf. And so we'd now like to listen to our dear friend and ally, Marc Morial, president of the National Urban League.
Greetings, I'm Marc Morial. I serve as president and CEO of the National Urban League. I want to thank my friend and brother, Dr. Ron Daniels, as well as Mayor Ras Baraka for convening this national town hall meeting on gentrification, which issues once again a state of emergency without urgency. The displacement of Black people and Black culture continues in cities across the nation. I also proudly served as the mayor of New Orleans from 1994 to 2002. And my late great father, Ernest N. Morial, served as mayor of New Orleans from 1978 to 1986 as the city's first African-American mayor, that city being my beloved hometown of New Orleans. And I wish to offer some thoughts and perspectives for people in our community, but more specifically also for Black mayors, tools that are essential if we are going to combat this gentrification that is occurring in cities across the nation, which wipes out, in some instances, historic African-American neighborhoods, threatens culture across the board. This gentrification, if you will, is part of a trend which has been in place since the 1950s. And that was the trend of, if you will, the white flight from cities to the suburbs, the disinvestment in redlining in the cities from which white communities left, and now this return of many folks back into America's urban communities. We want America's urban communities to be vibrant and strong, but we don't want it to take place at the expense of residents who built these communities, who struggled in these communities, who hung in these communities when others have left these neighborhoods behind. I say to every mayor, that number one, you have to understand when and where and how it is happening in your community. Number two, you can't combat it with rhetoric. You need policies. One policy I advocate for every city is to skillfully and effectively develop a plan or a policy for affordable housing. Displacement easily occurs when there is insufficient affordability of housing, both rental and home ownership in a community. Mayors must be dogged in ensuring that there is a comprehensive policy to build and retain and rehabilitate affordable housing units in your city. And then secondly, you must deploy your financial resources, your capital budget, your community development block grant dollars to those communities that are at risk of gentrification, to substantiate them and to strengthen them. We have to, when we talk about affordable housing, talk about affordable home ownership, not simply affordable rental. Affordable rental is important, but affordable home ownership is also key. We must substantially build these neighborhoods, and we also must use our resources and our zoning tools to try to ensure neighborhood stabilization versus mass removal and gentrification. This is not an easy issue to deal with. This is not an issue for which standard policies will work. This is an issue where creativeness and assertiveness is required. Now, albeit I led New Orleans in the 1990s, and I don't mean to suggest that those times were similar to these times in every respect. In some respects, yes. In some respects, no. I now lead the National Urban League, where one of our cardinal principles is to promote Black home ownership. And we do it in a variety of ways. One way we do it is by preparing people to become homeowners through home buyer education, otherwise known as housing counseling, through some down payment assistance programs, and in some communities through developing and building affordable housing units. We do this work every single day in communities across the nation. In Newark, New Jersey, our affiliate is involved in this work. In New Orleans, in Atlanta, in Chicago, in Lexington, in Louisville, in Philadelphia, in Washington, D.C. We are involved in this work, but we cannot, and you cannot, do it alone. Mayors have to build the coalitions that include everyone from the bankers and the business interests to community leaders and community interests, to faith leaders, to ensure that we confront this issue. So let me take a step back and say a few closing things. When it comes to an affordable housing plan, you should know how many affordable units your community needs. You should know exactly how many affordable units your community has lost, neighborhood by neighborhood. I suggest a 10-year to a 20-year backward look, and I think we should have a 10 to 20-year forward look at what we need. Number two, you should do a backward look at your infrastructure investments in those very same neighborhoods. Have we repaired streets? Have we built community centers? Have we invested in the kind of programs that make the neighborhoods wholesome and healthy? Then you should do a forward-leaning plan to address those, to try to stabilize neighborhoods before gentrification takes place. Now, in some places, rent control is a bad word, but I do believe that we have to find some ways to put some downward pressure on rents, because the market is failing because we are not building enough housing units. I think affordable housing units, I think the nationwide number may be a loss, or rather a deficit of some 4 million units. So the bottom line is, mayors, you've got to understand this issue and use your bully pulpit, yes. Build coalitions, yes, but have a plan that uses the tools and the powers you control as mayor of a city, as a person who can impact how dollars are spent, how budgets are prepared, what zoning laws and zoning rules look like. You can't do it unless you build the will. The idea is not to quote unquote keep people out. The idea is to stabilize neighborhoods and communities for those folks that have built these neighborhoods over the years. It's crucial to do it. Otherwise, we're playing musical chairs with people. Today, they'll move from the city to the inner ring suburbs. 20 years from now, they'll move back because of the, if you will, roller coaster of how housing works. Neighborhood stabilization should be our watchword. We must stabilize neighborhoods so that they can grow going forward. Again, I want to thank both Ron Daniels and Mayor Baraka for all their great leadership. And I want to close by saying democracy is under threat. And on the 12th of April, the National Urban League will release its State of Black America report. Its central theme and tenet will be how we fight back on the attacks on American democracy. So go to stateofblackamerica.org to receive updates. Go to nul.org to learn more. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Marc Morial. Follow the National Urban League at Nat Urban League. Have a great conference. Let's stay together. Let's remain unified. Onward we go. Thank you.
Well, we certainly thank Marc Morial, who's a strong ally with the National Urban League in this work. Before we get to our panel discussion, I really want to point out that none of this happens because of IBW by itself and because we think we're such great leaders and whatever. We have friends and allies, people who are willing to work with us. Some of them are on our planning committee, others are just resource people. Some of them are with us this evening and some may or may not, but I think it's important to just give them a shout out and let you know who some of them are. So just want to mention some of the people who are a part of the advisory planning committee. And there are others who are on the planning committee. So on the panel, I'll introduce them later. We have Mary Thomas, who is an international advisor with the World Conference of Mayors from Hillcrest, Maryland. From Washington, D.C. We have the dynamic Reverend Tony Lee, bad brother. I've known him for many, many years. He is a pastor of Community of Hope AME Church in Hillcrest, Maryland. We have David Harris, who is the former executive director of the esteemed Institute for Race and Justice at Harvard University in Boston. We have Baba Keeley, who is with Black Lives Matter LA and an IBW board member who is taking on this work. One of the preeminent sort of theoreticians and practitioners of sustainable economic development and therefore also countering gentrification is Dr. Jeffrey Lowe. He's associate professor of the Department of Urban Planning and Environmental Policy at Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. Ronald Galvin is the managing director of community investments at Greater Washington Community Foundation in Washington, D.C. Our beloved friend and comrade for many years, Dr. Ntangalizi Sanyika, is a retired professor at Texas Southern University and a community economic development specialist. Dr. Nashani Frazier is associate professor of American Studies and History at University of Kansas, which he is working hard on saving and reversing gentrification in Durham, North Carolina. And then Don Cravens has been assigned to us by President Morial. He is the executive vice president and chief operating officer of the National Urban League. So these are our folks, and I hope I didn't miss anybody, who are working with us on our planning committee. And now I'd like to introduce our panel, but I also want to let you know how we're going to do this. We're asking our panelists to do what we call vignettes, to give us a sketch of what is going on in these are 6 communities, and you'll be apprised of them in just a moment. But the point is for them to say a bit about the vision and mission of their organizations, what the nature of the struggle is, and what it is that they are doing to overcome it. And then to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that exist. And these are some very, very serious organizers and activists who are doing incredibly powerful work. And once again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find our folk who are engaged in this struggle all across the country. I've already seen people signing into the chat saying, we want to connect. We want to connect because we are about building that network. We're about building out, if you will, we're building about building out both the resource center and the network. So our panelists are as follows, and I'm going to introduce them, and then we're going to get them moving on their vignettes. We have coming from Los Angeles, Damien Goodmon, who's the executive director of the Crenshaw Subway Coalition. From Houston, Texas, Sister Assata Richards, who is the executive director of the Sankofa Institute. From Durham, North Carolina, we have Camryn Smith, executive director, Communities and Partnership. And from Seattle, Washington, a lot of times they say we leave the West Coast out and so forth. We haven't left them out today. We have Wyking Garrett, who's president and CEO of Africatown Community Land Trust. And then from Newark, New Jersey, it was referenced by President Morial. We have Vivian Cox Frazier, president and CEO of the Urban League of Essex County, New Jersey. And from St. Louis, in the center of the country, can't leave the center out, we have Melvin White, who's founder and director of the Martin Luther King, and we are on this day, the Martin Luther King Beloved Streets initiative from St. Louis, Missouri. So what we're going to do is ask each of them, and I'll call them in order to make their presentations. And then we're going to have a period for comments and questions and answers from the audience. And we're going to take them on seriously and hope that we'll get some comments, some observations as well. But this is the meat. This is the heart of this great effort that we've launched today. And we want to begin with Damien Goodmon from the Crenshaw Subway Coalition, the Chief Executive Officer. Damon, you have the floor for your vignette.
I appreciate you, Dr. Daniels, and the entire IBW team for bringing this amazing collection of Black practitioners in resisting gentrification together. I thank you for bringing together the previous one in Newark, and I look forward to what we will be able to do going forward, especially from this august gathering on this somber day. First, I think it doesn't require a lot of explanation as to where the Crenshaw community is, but I am in the center of Black Los Angeles. It is a place and space that many who fled the segregated South came to in hopes of a better future. And we have the unfortunate distinction today of being the hottest real estate market in one of America's most unaffordable cities. A place that had been constantly divested has now been, I say, reimagined, Columbused. We call it the Great White Return, and it's not just the individuals, most importantly, it is the capital. And things that are happening here were unimaginable to many folk. This is a skyscraper that just went up that we challenged, but we're not successful. We have 30-story skyscrapers. It's got about 1,200 units in it with 2-bedroom rents that are basically twice and 3 times the mortgages of most of the homeowners. Now, within the Crenshaw community, like so many communities throughout Black America, the majority of residents are renters, nearly 2/3. But even among the homeowners, about 1/3 of Black homeowners are spending over 50% of their income in housing. And so it's an important point for us to, when we have this conversation, to all recognize we are living in homes and renting apartments that if they were today, if they were when we moved in, the rent and cost that they are today, they would not be Black communities. And so what is this challenge? I mean, I love that Marc Morial, and I look forward to working with him and continuing to work with the Urban League in many of these conversations, but he said something. He said the market is failing. And I would argue that the market is doing what the market does. The market is succeeding. It is a process of divestment and replacement for those who are vulnerable with those who can pay more that is taking place. It just now is happening in the urban area again, as in a cyclical cycle. And ultimately, we as Black people in America are most vulnerable because we have systemically been robbed the opportunity to create stable communities. It's about power, as Markham talked about it. And we have a right to self-determination as I run through these slides. But we also should see that though this is a unique and specific Black America crisis, this is an international phenomenon, right? We have private equity firms with trillions, I did not misspeak, with trillions in assets, financial or put their money put in, financialized, capitalized by public pension dollars that are buying up our communities. They've been doing it for a while, but they're now at a level that is unheard of. And it takes this collaboration between the private and the public sector to enact this racialized harm that we are all feeling. And so we in California, we in South Central, we are that race that has historically been deprived of homeownership opportunities, the right to self-determination, land liberation. And so we within LA County are the only race anticipated to see a numerical decline every decade into the future. LA County has a population, every other race in LA County is anticipated to see a numerical increase, but Black people are anticipated to see a numerical decline. And I want to lift up, because I know, especially with so many here, I want to lift up this other challenge, this rezoning process that's taking place as land that was formerly zoned industrial or short, 45 feet are being rezoned to be 10 stories, 15 stories greater density. Because I want to lift it up because the people doing it are a bunch of rabid, neoliberal, libertarian, Koch brothers backed conservatives, and they're using the language of our struggle. They're using the words and the focus of fair housing to enact this urban 2.0. And the government, so many governments are complicit in this. Patricia in the chat talked about how many of our elected officials we have and are complicit in this action. The Charles Barrons, the Lumumbas, the Ras Barakas are the exception, not the rule. And we have to be about making that change. And when we do these things, at least within the Crenshaw community, coming back where these rezonings are taking place, we as the Crenshaw Subway Coalition have geared up and organized around combating these large out-of-scale developments. And from time to time, we're actually able to get our elected officials in planning departments to agree with this. This was a tremendous effort on the District Square project, where we were able to get the Planning Commission to stop the development based on gentrification grounds. But it was overturned using one of these YIMBY laws. And so you have a Black community that comes together, renter, homeowners, business owners, getting the support of a Black local elected official, but these YIMBY laws, being again backed by prominent libertarian billionaires, including the Koch brothers, were used to allow this process, this Black erasure, this cultural erasure project to move forward. We're still fighting them on multiple fronts in that project. But in general, we as the Crenshaw Subway Coalition have said, we can't just be about combating, we have to be about building. And I have to lift up this historic effort to purchase the Crenshaw Mall, known as Downtown Crenshaw. It was and remains, I think, the most successful philanthropic and social impact investment effort in the history of Black America. We raised over $30 million in philanthropy, over $120 million with social impact investors to purchase our mall, bringing together the community, having it be an effort to take this major asset in Black America and bring it into community plan to stabilize the mall and build an urban community-owned village. And wouldn't you know, again, global speculators, the Deutsche Bank, that Deutsche Bank, working with the public pension funds, rejected our offer, which was higher and had better terms in favor of a local white gentrifier with a horrible history of sexism and racism, backed by a Russian oligarch who's known as a crony of Vladimir Putin. This is what we are dealing with. This is new. This is not what we were dealing with 30 years ago when we were looking in the aftermath of the uprising. And so how do we build, and what are we building? We are building this ecosystem of organizations who are about taking back our land. Yes, we're going to be on the streets and fighting, but we're also going to, and I see many of the people here are involved in community land trust to put our lands under community control so we can have this effort for self-determination advance itself. But with it, as you lifted up, Dr. Daniels, and I'll end with that, with it comes that significant need for capital. We have said internally that though we need and though we deserve some big old checks from the federal government, state government, local government, county government, every government that's out there, we can't continue waiting on them. We have to begin looking at creative solutions, looking at how we're able to pull our limited resources internally and build on the philanthropic and social impact investment interests that currently exist to take not hundreds, but thousands of units off the speculative market to build a community controlled land trust, to build a reparative economic system at its crux. And again, I begin with that. The market is working. It is a white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative system in which housing and displacement and increased houselessness is merely a symptom. It is not the cause. And so we have to be about creating these liberated spaces, these beloved communities I see. We have to be about creating our own economies here locally. And that is what we are attempting to do here in Crenshaw, and look forward to working with so many of the other incredible practitioners here who are in the chat, who are in this space as we identify ways in which we can move forward under these incredibly difficult terms.
Thank you very much, Damien. Now, for my timekeepers, y'all got to bring out your little pendulum here, because you know how we are. We will keep rolling on here. We want to make sure we keep it to those 8 minutes, so we have plenty of time for comments in the background. I think that might have just eased over a little bit. So for my timekeepers, now y'all be waving the flag so that I don't have to get smacked for having to step in. And I don't want my sister Assata to be chastising me because I let the brother go longer than she went, because Sister Assata can bring it as well. We now are calling on our sister Assata from Houston, Texas, to talk to us about the incredible work that she is doing there. Sister Assata, you have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for sharing this Monday with us to talk about what I think is the greatest crisis facing Black people and Black communities since our introduction to America in enslavement. This is the neighborhood of the historic Third Ward. It happens to be the home of George Floyd, and it is a neighborhood where I'm a third generation resident. This is what is known as Emancipation Park. It will celebrate its 150th anniversary. It is the first public park in the state of Texas, and it was founded and created by people of African descent to celebrate their liberation from enslavement. And as you can see, these townhouses, I'm not going to repeat what Mayor Baraka and the leader of the Urban League and Damien said. I think we all know the threat, and I think we have become proficient in the conditions that have led us here. I will talk about why I think this is a state beyond a state of emergency, as our communities are hemorrhaging. Black people are disappearing day in and day out from our communities, particularly here in Houston. And so I want to share that this is a bit of a data snap, right, of what has happened in the last 20 some years. As we can see in our neighborhoods, these are all historic African-American neighborhoods. Independence Heights, we had Sister Tanya be with us in Newark, is a founded African-American neighborhood. Sunnyside is a founded African-American neighborhood, and Third Ward is a historic African-American neighborhood that was once a Jewish community. When the Jewish community left or fled, became an African-American neighborhood. And as you can see, this is the decrease in Black population in these very important historic neighborhoods, right? We're talking Independence Heights from 2000 to 2008 lost 45% of its Black population. Black people have disappeared literally overnight, right? And Sunnyside is a neighborhood, right, that is following the same pattern and is in need of a stark intervention. Third Ward, my neighborhood, where I am the third generation resident of, has lost 44% of its Black population. Literally, on a given day, you will see demolition and the removal of people from a Monday to a Tuesday, from a Tuesday to a Wednesday. We have no zoning in Houston. We have no substantial renter protections, right? And so the market is doing what the market does, and it is hemorrhaging Black people from our historic communities. There is an enormous amount of work on root shock, on the depression, the severing of social relationships, the harm to health, mental and physical health that African Americans face when they are displaced forcibly from their communities. And so we have been working for approximately the last 10 years on a strategy that is both at the place of individuals and place, right? And so I think part of the problem that we face is either deciding that we're going to work around the markets or we're going to work in housing, right? That gentrification is a housing issue, right? It is both an economic issue that affects the economy of the neighborhood, that also affects the housing of the neighborhood. And so we've done our very, very best to be very comprehensive. We started the first financial opportunity center in our city that focused on Black communities and primarily Black residents in our neighborhood, right? That one-on-one contact with residents around social services, around household employment, around the needs that they have as a household, food security, right? Because to bring people into this movement, we've got to serve them where they are. We also use the Neighborhood Development Center, NDC's model, one of the only models that's based on entrepreneurship that seeds the entrepreneurs in a neighborhood. We went up to St. Paul to work on this model. It's a model that says the brother that's selling, fruit on the corner, the sister that's selling, meals or are doing some laundry. Those are the entrepreneurs of your neighborhood, right? And so we have incubated over close to 75 residents into entrepreneurship. Also connected to that was the cooperative economy development, right? Because we understand that we've got to create jobs with a greater impact. And we understand entrepreneurship takes a lot of resources, and entrepreneurship will not be for everybody. There are people that have been historically locked out of the labor market, right? And they need to be invested in. And so we went up to Cleveland to work with the Democracy Collaborative and the Cleveland Foundation on their evergreen model and began to work on cooperative businesses, particularly worker-owned businesses. We also worked with the Democracy Collaborative to come up with a plan for an anchor collaborative, right? The understanding you can build all the entrepreneurs you want. You can work on building strong businesses, right? But if they don't have really the benefits of long-term contracts for the procurements of goods and services, those businesses don't often scale to their full capacity, right? So tying entrepreneurship, working with the small business and the individual entrepreneurs and the cooperatives, and then matching it with opportunities at the neighborhood level. We also became the first urban serving designated Main Street program, which is a national program. We went to Sweet Auburn, speaking of Dr. King in Atlanta, and saw the work that they were doing, right? And said, our assets are not just buildings. They're not just brick and mortar. They're the history and the culture and the lived experiences of the people in the neighborhood. And so we lobbied and had the Texas Main Street program change the application to say that history and culture were the reasons to create a Main Street program. And so we're building our economy for Black people off our history and our culture. And so I don't want Dr. Daniels to ring the bell on me. I want to talk about, I tell no lies and claim no easy victories, right? That we have had some successes, but we've also had some failures, right? We have been able to create what is deemed to be the largest land trust, community land trust. That was, and this is a typo, forgive me. It's the Houston Community Land Trust, which has had a strong partnership with the Land Bank, which has had a strong partnership with the city, right? They provide the subsidy, the land bank has had the land, and we have been able to bring in and make 100 homes into the community land trust. And this is also important because now we have what's called housing choice, where nonprofits and other CDCs can bring their properties into the land trust. This has been a very difficult model, right? Because the belief that African Americans are still holding on to some illusion that individual home ownership is going to pioneer them out of poverty and save them in their community is a false analysis, right? And so we've been able to show that it is the land being in a trust that can then have permanent long-term affordability.
You want to unmute.
I didn't mute, the host muted me. We also had a fight for the community benefits agreement. We worked very hard to introduce the idea of a community benefits agreement, the first in the state of Texas. We worked with a university, against a university that was building an innovation district at the bequest of our mayor. Through our efforts, we got the university to agree to create a community benefits agreement, and the city appropriated our work and signed the agreement with the developer. Again, that's a loss. Even though everybody in this city wants us to cheer the fact that they were able to sign an agreement unheard of, which is a developer's agreement, right? Around $14 million with benefits that had never been heard of again, because the community does not control and does not manage and are not the signees of that agreement. We do not hold that as a success. We do hold our ability to build a local reparative economy. Damien said this word. We have incubated and incorporated the first cooperative construction company in the state of Texas. We have created the first cooperative for a community health workers, the second in the state of Texas for home care, and the first for African Americans in the state of Texas, right? So we know that we're not going to use the same tools Audre Lorde told us to dismantle the master's house. We've got to look outside the box, and we've got to look at innovative ways that bring deep democracy and deep equity. And we see cooperative businesses as our way forward. And my final point is, where is our look towards Black liberation? I want to say that we were a group to be funded by the Solidarity Network, right? They were one of the ones that saw our vision and our work and has given us some foundational dollars to help us build what we think is a community level driven work around a reparative economy. We're working on a local policy agenda, right? We're not going to develop and program our way out of this, right? We're looking for a community driven scorecard. We have to have more accountability from the nonprofits, our city partners, our funders, right? Monies come through our neighborhoods all the time, but we don't have a clear understanding of what that impact is. And then we need to have a local incubator and accelerator for cooperative businesses. And my final point is that I'm so proud that after this virtual convening, I'll be jumping on a plane going to Baltimore, Maryland, right? We're having a national convening of Black cooperators, right? How do we build a national network and an agenda around funding, around incubating and accelerating Black cooperation around the country, right? We've got to think local, be local, but we've got to act nationally and act internationally. And I think this conversation is an invitation to care about what's happening in your neighborhood, but involve yourself in what's happening to Black people around this country. We will not win this without banding together and pulling together and working together and building a strong movement for Black liberation. Thank you.
All right. Incredibly powerful. And let me just say that the reason why we ask people to do the vignettes is because this is the appetizer, so to speak. We are looking forward to doing a virtual mini conference. We haven't set the date yet. It will be somewhere in the summer, in which we'll spend a longer amount of time with each other. But the important thing is, I dare say there are people are hearing about initiatives that they find exciting and interesting. You're listening to people that you may not have been connected with. What we do in the Institute of the Black World 21st Century is to connect people. We believe in creating cultivating a culture of collaboration to heal and empower Black families, communities, and nations. It's very simple. It's not, that's our goal. So I get excited when people are sharing ideas and we're learning from each other. I can recall when we convened the conference in Newark, there was a lot of, in fact, we even wrote about it because we were out there reading about what was happening around the country. And one of the places we read about was Durham, North Carolina, how people were struggling and fighting to hold on to and to cling to the traditional Black community had been developed there. You know, it has this reputation. We just saw the what did you call it? The Final Four. In fact, there's a big basketball game that was going to be on tonight and all that. But underneath all of the hoopla is some serious displacement of Black people and Black culture. And Camryn Smith is one of those persons working along with her, with Nashani, who is also working hard, Frazier, to really counter and address gentrification in Durham. So we're so happy to have you here, and you have the floor to let us know what is happening in Durham, North Carolina. Camryn Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. Appreciate you having me this evening. Camryn Smith, I'm one of the co-founders and the current executive director of Communities in Partnership, and along with Dr. Nashani Frazier, who is not only on our board, but also a longtime resident of Northeast Central Durham, of which the neighborhood we proudly live, love, and serve in. Durham has, over the course of the many years, has become kind of a target for the displacement and gentrification. I know when I came to this community, my husband came here for work. I came here kicking and screaming, didn't want to move to Durham, didn't know, both my parents were educated at North Carolina Central University, which is in the heart of the historic Hayti community, and didn't know a whole lot about Durham, but quickly grew within a very short period of time to dearly love this community in place over 20 years ago. And what you're looking at right now is a redlining map with, actually, we have another of our academic research partners who's actually on here. Dr. Danielle Sparlock is on here, who has helped us gather a lot of this information for this PowerPoint that we're about to look at. Sorry, I have my dog just came in the house, so sorry about that. And so we're looking at a red line map that was actually created in the 1930s and 40s of actually downtown Durham. And as you can see, Dr. Spurlock has gone in and actually identified the neighborhood in which we live in, which is Northeast Central Durham, which is for many years, many decades, the largest concentration of Black folks. And recently, within the last decade or so, increasing more brown people in our community as well. But if you can look at the red line map, you can see the areas over our neighborhood buttresses or is adjacent to the historic Hayti neighborhood, which is identified as D6. And then the area that is kind of the same color as the background of the map is where actually the intentional highway that actually dissected and tore up our community, 147, was placed to kind of fragment all of our people, to tear up our businesses, to tear up our neighborhoods and our communities. And so I agree with the brother who was on earlier about this system is highly intentional. And what I did want to highlight is we're going to have some real means of reparative funding. If repair is not at the central focus of what we're dealing with, we do not have a chance. And I also agree with Sister Assata that we cannot use the master's tools to dissect or to take down the master's house. And so how do we have new ways and new streams that are actually reparative and not extractive? Durham has a long history of Black excellence, Black resilience, Black ingenuity, but we also, and I'm going to speak truth, we also have huge issues of classism within the Black community. We have huge issues of our own people building wealth. One of the largest developers that helped gentrify what is now known the historic Cleveland Holloway community, unfortunately, is a Black-owned developer. And we have to have these conversations about how we can how we can all of us, I do not want to take away the ability for people to make a living and thrive, but do you have to basically gut the heart of your own people and community to do that? There has to be better ways and better options for us to have these difficult conversations. And also, when is enough enough? Having conversations of, do you really need to have $1 million in income or even $500,000 in income coming in every single year for you to be able to thrive? And most of our communities, no, you do not. And so, and having real community, and part of that is part of the conversations that we continue to have in our community, which I'll discuss that shortly. Let me see if I can get it to go. So what you're seeing now is an environmental scan of our community that Dr. Spurlock, along with Dr. Kofi Boone, helped us create to actually have a framework, because along with what the intentional divestment also comes a lot of health comorbidity and health risks that actually come about with our people because of the lack of clean water, the pollution and the contaminants that actually go along in our community, how they intentionally put chemical plants, cement chemical plants within a very short distance of residential communities, short distance of playgrounds in our community, and the intentionality with which that is done to allow for the housing and for the property values to just plummet. And then, of course, what we're seeing now is the resurgence of primarily, not all, but primarily white developers coming in and taking this land and going through the process of brownfields and other chemical and environmental remediations and actually bringing them up to code, because they're the ones that actually have the resources, have the connections, have the flush amount of cash to be able to bring those up to code without having to jump through all the hoops that oftentimes for organizations like myself or like Sister Assata's or Brother Damien's, that would be a huge it's just impossible for us to do that and renovate the houses and build houses that are respectful and dignified and clean and safe for everyone to live in. So having conversations also about how we can collectively come together to remediate a lot of the intentional environmental stressors that have caused so much of the health disparities that our people currently face. As you can see, also, we've broken down in the tracks. Many years ago, we had our mayor, one of our mayors, come and look at the community and broke us down in the census tract and actually put us on a path, unfortunately, that has caused some of the gentrification that's actually taking place. And we actually were challenging the mayor that if he didn't have a framework to actually put a placeholder in place to actually identify Black folks that are living here that are working class, working poor Black people, that all you're going to be able to do to bring these bring these income, these tracks up is actually move in higher income white people, higher income Black people that aren't connected to this space and actually gentrify the community. And so you can see East Durham is the neighborhood in which I live and love. And we have over 30% of our people experience food insecurity. The average median income is less than 30,000 within the communities and partnership community. It's around 24,000. The AMI for city center Durham neighborhoods now topped at $95,000 last year, which is phenomenal. We are being called the San Francisco of the South because of all the high tech that's moving in. We have Google that is already here and expanding. We have Apple that's going to be on the end of our neighborhood and our community in Research Triangle Park. We are buttressed between the downtown that's actually booming and also Research Triangle Park, which many of you know is where Cisco, IBM, GlaxoSmithKline, all of these high-tech firms are coming. It takes me 5 minutes, if that, to get to that point from my neighborhood. Over 35% of our folks have high blood pressure. We're not even going to talk about some of the other comorbidity health risks. We still have children in our neighborhood, unfortunately, who are being poisoned by lead because of the lack of access that our people have to remediate these issues. And over 50% of our people pay 30% or more of their income towards rent. And so what is CIP doing? CIP, we own housing in our community. We've partnered with self-help. And that's a good and a bad situation right there. It has its ups and downs, as anything does. But we purchased multifamily units in our community, and we've taken a pledge at the beginning of COVID that we have held solid to, that we are not going to displace our own people because of a lack failure to pay rent. Right now, we have less than 10% actually of our tenants that are actually being able to pay rent on a month-to-month basis. And we have not evicted not one because of the lack of being able to pay for rent. We refuse to do that. And all of our tenants, 90% of our tenants are Black and 10% of our tenants are Latinx. We have our housing. We also have partnered with Durham Tech Community College because they wanted to actually expand affordable housing in our neighborhood, and we're working with them to hold them accountable. We brought in Brother Nathaniel Smith with the Partnership for Southern Equity to help bring along that process. We also are involved, as Sister Assata has said, in economic development. We have a lot of food systems work. We have our food co-op that actually has over 500 member households of our food co-op. We started off with having 3 to 4 African-American farmers. To date, we have over 50 Black and Indigenous farmers that actually source our food from. And so we have this rural to urban food systems that we own, that we actually feed ourselves and feed our people, and actually have created also a farmers market out of that concept as well, where we highlight the Black and brown farmers and people not only from our community, but across the Durham-wide community actually are able to actually purchase fresh and local food and produce from these Black and Indigenous farmers. We also have our Culinary Femme Collective, which is a group of Black femme identifying and women-owned businesses that are all committed to cooperative business structures that do not have wealth-building strategies predicated on the highly oppressive business strategies that are in the food systems right now. All of them pay a minimum of $18 to $20 an hour. These are small Black and Latinx business owned by women, and they are pulling together resources. They share commissary kitchen space. We're actually about this year to launch them in their own commissary kitchen space that we've developed with Student U. We also are looking for storefront space for them to have a cooperative storefront space for them to share storefront space together and to actually train and bring in other folks. They also have a value-added food component where they're all producing, multiples of them have produced their own shelf-stable food products, and we're putting them on the food products on store shelves around the Triangle area. And then we also have the Thriving Communities Fund, which we've raised over $150,000 to date for Black and Indigenous and Latinx business owners to help them band-aid some of the negative impacts of COVID. And we're soon to open a cafe space as well, where we'll be hiring folks from our community to be able to run that space that will highlight all of these initiatives along with our fresh air market as well. And in that, we still have our community-based education and leadership development, where we actually bring our folks in and help them understand why our communities are situated the way they are, so we do not continue the legacy of internalized oppression and the lack of opportunity that we think that we should have because of our own negative outcomes, how we think that we can't handle things, but we tell people we can. We are resilient as a people, and you need to know who you come from. So we keep on reminding them and not listening to the negative tropes that white supremacy would have us believe about ourselves. So that is the work that we're doing in Durham. Okay, all right. Well, folks, I talk about rapid speed. People are committed to getting it all in. So the vignettes. Okay. All right, next. We're seeing in the chat, people are appreciating the vision, the courage, the creativity, the inventiveness, and this bodes well for the kind of work that we're attempting to do. So now we'd like to introduce from Seattle, Washington, and I've been out there and seen some of the decimation of the Central Business District and have people lament it, and people are talking about, oh, they're living out in various other places, but they're living in these places because they were driven out of these, the communities that were built by our brothers and sisters, our ancestors, our forebears for years and years and years. So one of the most impressive models I've also seen and heard about is Africatown, the community trust. And so we now want to hear from Wyking Garrett. Brother Garrett, you have the floor.
Peace. Hey, good evening to all. It's good to be here. Thank you, Dr. Daniels and the team at IBW. It is definitely a blessing and an honor to be among, such powerful minds, solutionaries, and people, building, turning rhetoric into reality in the form of, bricks and mortar and progress for our people. My name is Wyking Garrett. I am a third generation community builder from the Central District, our beloved Africatown here in Seattle. And would like to just share a little bit about, about our work. And again, appreciate seeing those that are, preserving and building our Africatowns across this country. It is very inspirational. So let me get into presentation here. All right, so when we speak about Africatown, it's really more than an organization. It really is a concept. It's about, holding space, making space for the beauty, the brilliance, and the best of our Black diaspora experience, regardless of time or geographic location, to really be inspiration and a menu for what we build into our future, And so when we think about Seattle, that Black history starts with a man by the name of Manuel Lopez, who was from the Cape Verde off the coast of Africa, West Africa, so from the very inception, our presence here has been one of the Black African diaspora. He was followed by other pioneers, namely one by the name of William Gross, who arrived here in 1861 after being working on the Underground Railroad, negotiating safe passage for Africans that were escaping from captivity into Panama and Canada. And he bought 12 acres of land in what is known now as the Central District, again, our Africatown, and established that as a settling place for Black people, and established that as basically a Black community. More migrations came, particularly around World War II, which was the era in which my grandparents came here, and many others, for the wartime economy, jobs for Boeing, shipyards, and fleeing the hostile Jim Crow conditions of the post-slavery South. They created a rich community, creators, entrepreneurs, makers, builders, self-sufficient like many of the Black communities, the Black Wall Streets across the country. And despite that, it still was in the face of much adversity, but it did become the second, first chapter of the Black Panther Party outside of California, second Black Bake west of the Mississippi. My grandfather was one of the co-founders, and also the longest occupation or act of civil disobedience in known in U.S. history to turn a school into African-American Heritage Museum, a struggle for that, which was actually after stopping a police precinct from being built in the heart of the community. And that was an effort that my father, Marc, Garrett, was catalyst and the leader, and I grew up in that struggle. And so we see this community, which was concentrated. You look here, you can see where the population was in 1960. And then from there, we go into all of the issues of redlining, urban renewal, Negro removal, as many call it, benign neglect, all the way to drugs flooding into the community from Central American wars, and then weed and seed and mass incarceration. And then we see how the city overall trajectory has been one of great growth. It's become a tech mecca. Microsoft, Amazon's, many other tech companies here. And so it's booming for some, but it has been a series of bombs that have been busting the Black community here over the generations. Just now being reported that it's less than what was once 90% is down to less than 10%. So our struggle is significant. When we looked at the comprehensive plan for the city of Seattle, we did not see our future All we saw was gentrification, you know, displacement, and really economic ethnic cleansing. And so our goal was to not just accept that, but to create our own planning process of Black Seattle 2035. And so from that process, we began to mobilize our community to imagine, design, look at what not only do we want in the future, what can we do now to represent that future, bringing community members back to really place a claim. And out of that process, we developed an equitable development framework to guide, you know, projects and partnerships that we would enter in that really centered around equity, right? When we say equitable development, root word equity, for that's ownership, and then how's the resources allocated. The first project that represented that was a development at the site of that originally Liberty Bank, which became the Liberty Bank building. And through partnerships, we were able to get this built and bring 90%, you know, lease up back to Black community. We just acquired a square block in just the last October, which had a former nursing home, which we have repurposed as a community home, enhanced shelter program to reduce the overrepresentation of Black men amongst the homeless population. We have our next project that just broke ground. Africatown Plaza will be 126 units over commercial space. We are renovating an former fire station into an innovation hub to really be the epicenter of our cultural innovation, Africatown Cultural Innovation District, connecting the brilliance and genius in our community with the larger economy, working with other community organizations that are focused on bringing our young people out of the school to prison pipeline, but providing housing and co-located culturally responsive resources on the ground for them, with creative justice and community passageways, local organizations, but also not just stopping at rental, but focus on how do we build or are building affordable home ownership into the community as well. And so everything that we've done to this point has been something that we've had to, you know, fight for. We know that we have to continue to organize, and though we've had some successes, which give us an example of what's possible, we know that we have a long way to go. As Nipsey Hussle once said, it's a marathon, you know, and we like to think of it more as a relay, as our work is about taking the baton of those who have established our communities, built our community, struggle for us, and then really running our lap. But it is a long way to go towards really a new normal rooted in equity, which we think is our focus has been around land, access to capital, and control over the resources and the institutions that are supposed to impact our lives. And so we continue to put the call out and look forward to connect with others around reparations now, making them pay the fee, freeing the land, and building our Africatowns. Thank you.
All right, that was wonderful. And you introduced the word, because some of you may be aware that the Institute of the Black World 21st Century is the convener of the National African American Reparations Commission. And Camryn, you hit on it as well. Some of this will have to be a part of a reparations solution. And I'll talk more about that in detail, because, you know, we have people who are trying to restrict the definition of reparations in a way that would not include this kind of damage. And we're saying, no, it is not only for enslavement. The enslavement was obviously one of the greatest Holocausts in human history, but it's all of the legacies and those policies that were derivative from enslavement. And gentrification, redlining is definitely one of them. And I really appreciate the way in which the presentation Wyking began, because it shows, you know, how someone came from Cape Verde over and began and so forth. And the way some of this is shaken out, some of these folks would be disqualified from being able to receive reparations. And of course, we're not going to stand for that in a positive, constructive way. We're talking about a much more expansive definition, but reparations is definitely on the table. Now I'd like to turn to a sister who was referenced by the president of Urban League. He didn't call her by name, but he just said our affiliate in Newark is working on this issue. And so he must have been talking about a sister who has been with us from the very beginning and has hung in there with us from ups and downs, and when it was going good and flowing and maybe not flowing, but she's been steady on the course. So we so much appreciate you for for hanging in there with us in the city of Newark. And we want to now yield the floor to Vivian Cox Frazier.
All right. Good evening. Wow, I feel like I'm sitting I need to sit at the feet of all you guys doing this community development work for such a long time. I've been at the Urban League about 20 years. I'm Vivian Cox Frazier, President and CEO of the Urban League of Essex County in Newark, New Jersey. And I'll say for most of that 100 years, the Urban League has traditionally been a social service organization, really focused on human development and really helping families advance economically. I'd say about 10 years ago, we really started pivoting our work to really being more comprehensive community development. The intersection, I say the Urban League sits at the intersection of people and place. As we started to look at the development that was going on in our community, we wanted to get engaged. And that's when we started fighting with the city because they kept saying, you know, we're going to redevelop all these buildings and what's going to happen to them. And I kept saying, well, what about the people? Like, you can't build a community without focusing and centering your work on people. So I would say that's what the Urban League brings to this movement and this work around revitalizing communities, is that our work has always been centered on families and community. And we can't lose sight of that as we talk about building buildings and development. And as I got engaged in that, certainly started to learn that development is almost like another grant, I would say, in a sense that, you know, most of the Urban League's work was in social service programs, and we did reimbursement grants. You know, development, you're working for your reimbursement for a lot longer time, right? You got to put all the resources out there to develop your projects, and then it takes time to get that return, get that money paid back. So I really started to embrace more, you know, what was the impact of development on the children and the families in this community, and started to do more research, particularly around the fact that disorder and chaos and incompatible uses in neighborhoods, it really affects the cognitive development of children's brains. And when you start thinking about that, how living in communities that are disordered, that are lacking of resources, that have been disinvested for decades, what it's doing to our children and our families. No wonder we're in toxic places, right? So part of what we have to do is focus that work, even as we're building, we're talking about holistic development of healing, really. So how do you do the work and center it around the people that live there? So I'm just going to give a little brief presentation about the League and our work around the community development space. We started, and we were tutoring about 400 kids, and my tutoring team went out, and she said, my tutoring director said, I don't have enough kids. I said, well, open the door, go get them. You know, there are a lot of kids that need tutoring. And when they went out, and it wasn't that far from the Urban League's office, and they encountered a young man on the street, and he said, you know, Urban League, what y'all doing? So my team went in their Urban League shirts, and he was in his Urban League attire, right? He was in his urban attire, I would say. And they started talking. He said, oh, okay, that woman over there, she got some kids. She probably needs some tutoring. So my team then went, and this woman, she said about 5 kids. And then I said, well, we're gonna start doing more engagement in this neighborhood, because the young man on the corner clearly sensed that his future was different than that of my team. Now, my team is a Black team, and we're out on the corner, and he was like, oh, I can't believe y'all came and talked to me, right? And so we said, no, we're gonna change that work, and we're gonna start organizing in the community. And I said, well, what are we gonna do? We're gonna build a plan. We're gonna get a plan for this neighborhood. And we engaged about 1,000 residents in the development of a plan. And that plan is called the Fairmont Plan, because it's the neighborhood is the Fairmont neighborhood. It's in the West Ward of Newark. It's one of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods in the city of Newark, which is a disadvantage as a high poverty rate as a city. And as we start to organize people, they would say, I would say education, and they would say abandoned properties, the trash, you know, the crime. So we really had to reframe that work to really be resonant with what they want. What do you want? Where do you see your neighborhood going, and what is it you want? And so really we developed this document called the Fairmont Plan. And that document really speaks to what residents wanted in their neighborhood. Now, I don't know if I'm going to share this screen right. I thought I wanted to share my screen. Let's see if I can do that. Share the screen. Oh, that shows how crazy my my screen is. If you see all the documents I have open, I hope that's not true. Let's see. See, I've got this bar on the top of my thing. Okay. Slideshow. Okay, that should work. Okay, well, we'll see. Can you see? I guess you're seeing my screen with all my documents open, probably. Can you see a screen? Okay, good. So, this really shows the programs and services of the Urban League. We really have a comprehensive, holistic approach to community development and revitalization. And really at the core of that is the mission of the League, which is about social and economic self-sufficiency. So I say there can be no equitable development if there's no equity. So really our goal is to create the wealth in our community, and so that community members really benefit from the revitalization that happens. The Urban League's office is right around here. So the city had planned this whole revitalization of the neighborhood in this red area just because it was the highest rate of abandonment in the city. And we said, okay, well, the League is going to go out and do the organizing and engaging of the residents around what they wanted. And then we built a plan, which we call the Fairmont Strategic Plan. And the community came up with their main goals, which is promote jobs and economic opportunity, strengthen the community, neighborhood, and families, reduce crime, improve public safety, improve educational opportunities, and enhancing the quality of life. We've engaged over 1,000 residents in the development of that plan. And it was interesting to see, if you think about these 5 things, it's what everybody wants. And that's it's not so much an aha, but it's really to say, stop thinking our neighbors and our communities don't deserve what everybody's getting. We want us to get everything, right? And so really, it really helped me solidify around the Urban League and our work, which was, what do you need an institution for? You need an institution to get those resources and those things that the communities need that they can't get by themselves. And that's why we exist, to make sure that we are an accountable institution to the residents and the community we serve. We serve a broader area than this neighborhood, but this neighborhood really is the intersection, like I said, of people and place. And how do we address these challenges that are in our neighborhoods right now? So Fairmont is what you would call a middle neighborhood. 50 years ago, it was the strivers and the people that had migrated during the Great Migration came here. You had working class people, plumbers, teachers, they all lived together. And this was a community that they built. And it's also the community that was disinvested, as in many neighborhoods, when people moved to the suburbs and there was the flight. And so it was left with a community. If you drive through it, you'll see a lot of disinvestment. And our approach really is about rebuilding homes for affordable home ownership, expanding residents' ownership of assets in their own community. We work with residents on their block to build up their properties. We train residents in construction skills. We now have a pipeline over 45 million in development projects, and we require any of the contractors that work with us to employ our trainees. So civic participation and organizing of residents to control what happens in their community is key to this work. So it's not us doing it, it's for them to do it by them for us. Well, not long after we did the Fairmont plan, we had this site that was developed that was identified as a potential development site. The residents said they wanted to promote economic development and opportunity in the community by developing this site here. And soon after we did the plan, we found out that the utility company had planned the switching station to go there. And it was like, well, they did some little shady thing with a straw proposal. Somebody else was a straw man. So the church sold it. They thought it was going to be a hotel. And lo and behold, found out it was a switching station. So, that started a big fight. Worked with the residents, organized everybody to fight it. So this is in your neighborhood. This is environmental injustice coming right at our door, and the Urban League is right on the corner over here somewhere. We're over here is our office. I'm like, not in our neighborhood. So we fought it, and let's see what we ended up with. This was what it started out looking like, something like that. And everybody, in our community said, it looks like a prison. And, it's sad, that's how they felt. And, we fought, we took them all the way to the Board of Public Utilities. It was a pretty extensive fight. And I'm going to share another slide to show, let's see. Let me share. So do you see like a schematic or something? I can't tell what's on the screen. Okay, so really through the fight, we had a community benefit agreement that involved the city of Newark, the public utility, the Urban League, and the neighborhood association, which when we started doing the plan, we helped establish this neighborhood association. And this was one of their first tests of, civic power, right? You're going to fight. We said, well, if you're going to fight somebody, why don't you fight the big people, fight the power company. So, but, it was, in a sense, I heard someone else mention about community benefits agreements and whether it's a success or not. So it's taken some time to view it as a success. Certainly, you didn't get what we wanted, which was for it not to be in this neighborhood, but we did get a community benefit agreement that's valued at about $20 million. They did redesign the whole thing. They made it smaller, they changed it. And the project that you see on the screen is a project that we're going to undertake, which will have a cultural center and retail and residential spaces. We're going to develop it. We're working with a group called Small Change. So we want to have neighborhood ownership of the center of the site, shared ownership of the site. So we're excited about that project. Certainly we do, since we started engaging in the neighborhood work, we established a separate entity, a development entity. As I said, we have over $40 million in a development pipeline of projects of developing homes for home ownership. All the homes that we have built so far are 2 and 3 family homes. And then the tenants, they come through our housing department. We help screen them. We help them get Section 8 vouchers and different things so that it's a win-win for the affordable homeowners as well as for the tenants. And we're really trying to build ownership for everyone and not to leave anyone behind. And some of the other initiatives we undertaken is just because of COVID, we are working to bring broadband to the neighborhood for the residents that have access to broadband. We certainly saw that youngsters and families, if you ask them if they have internet, they'll say they have internet. But then when you delve a little deeper, well, it's not really, they don't really have internet and they don't really have broadband. So really that is a civil rights issue, and we are working to bring broadband to this community. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can. I don't know how to do that. Okay. So did it stop sharing? I think pause the share, stop sharing the screen. Okay, great. And so I was going to talk a little bit about the characteristic of gentrification in Newark a bit, because I think Newark is like many cities and many communities. A lot of times when we talk about gentrification, we talk about higher income, white or other race people coming into a community, displacing residents. And you do see some of that in Newark. I'd say Newark is not at the place where some of the other cities are in terms of that process, but we have a lot of displacement. And that displacement is really because of rising rents and not the pressure of a poor city, poor communities, low incomes. Many people are in service jobs, and we know that those pay less. And therefore, we have a substantial amount of renters in Newark. And Climb is an entity of Rutgers University. They conducted an affordability and gap analysis of Newark's housing stock, and they really found a severe gap in low rent units. And actually, the study said that they needed to build 16,000 more units in renting at about $750 a month to meet residents' existing needs. The study was called Homes Beyond Reach. And certainly, there's a lot of vulnerability of housing displacement, really by incomes that cannot keep pace with asking rents. Very high eviction rate, low owner occupancy. Those are many of the characteristics that you see in our neighborhoods in Newark and around the country. And the housing cost, while reasonable to, let's say, the New York metro area. So New Yorkers will come over because Newark seems cheap to them. It seems reasonable to them. It's high for the residents that are here. They're already being priced out. but relative and absolute terms, people from New York and other places see an opportunity. And I agree with the panelists earlier, is that it's by intention. But I'm saying that capitalism is going to do what capitalism does. And capitalism and people do in capitalism is to find, bargains and take advantage of them. And it's where we are in our communities, it tends to be our communities that are taken advantage of, whether it's in the issue of housing and rising rents and being displaced, or even this issue with the switching station. The public service said, oh, well, they didn't target this community. Well, why was this 10-acre site even available in a community? It's because this community has suffered from disinvestment for so long. You wouldn't see this type of parcel available in other communities, but it was here, and they said it was contaminated. Well, how did it get contaminated? Well, where are you going to put the scissor factory? You put it in a low-income community. So all of these multiple layers of disadvantage affect our communities, and really the work that we're here to do is to help people overcome that and understand that it's not something wrong with them. It's something wrong structurally, and how do you challenge it? And I believe you challenge it by demanding the resources that your community needs, and in order to get them the things that they need and deserve. And so based on that Fairmont strategic plan, it's by us, for us, by them, for them. They direct what the Urban League is doing in this community. And we use our collective power to bring justice and economic opportunity for those that live in this neighborhood and, broader beyond this community. But for our development work, we've been concentrating on this particular community, the Fairmont Heights neighborhood. Thank you.
You're muted, Dr.
Muted.
Daniels.
I was saying I'm delighted to get that view from Newark. And last but not least, we want to hear from St. Louis, the Beloved Streets Initiative, the Beloved MLK, Martin Luther King Initiative. And many of you recall Melvin coming to Newark and talking about this incredible initiative and what he discovered and what he found and what he, on his own, I think I recall a former former mailman. And I don't mean Carl Malone, I mean a postman delivering the mail, and you begin to say, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture. So we're delighted to have Melvin White talk to us now about the MLK Beloved Streets Initiative, and then we're going to open it up for comments and questions and to the listening audience. So Melvin, you have the floor.
All right, thanks a lot for having me on once again. It's an incredible staff up here right now, and I'm gonna give you a brief history about Beloved Streets of America, how the vision started, talk a little bit about our gentrification here in St. Louis, as well as some of the struggles that we're having up here in St. Louis and some of the positive things that we have going. So my name is Melvin White, founder and CEO of Beloved Streets of America. Beloved Streets of America is a St. Louis-based 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is bound by a united vision. Beloved Streets of America fosters collaborations among individuals, groups, and organizations to generate resources to revitalize and conserve the streets that bears the honorable name of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Our vision is that every street within the United States of America that bears Dr. King's name is vibrant, beautiful, and prosperous communities and streets. In our 15-year study of various MLK streets across the country, we found out the majority of these streets to be in impoverished sections of the country, crime-ridden, drug-infested corridors, that most of them seems to lack any sustainable economic development activities on these streets. And we all know that if Dr. King was alive right now today, that's an absolute slap in his face to be recognized in some of the most notorious streets across this country. There's actually over 900 streets across America that bears Dr. King's name. You have some overseas in Germany, India, and some more countries over there overseas. Okay, we want to focus on urban agriculture because we know the majority of these streets and roads of Dr. King that bears Dr. King's name there's food deserts. There's not any place to go to get fresh vegetables and fruit and so on and so forth. So we created an aeroponic system where we're growing our own vegetables using a light mist. And it's going to be 10% fresher than the fruits and vegetables that you can get at your local grocery store. We also want to focus on solar technology, social programs. We have partnered with an organization here called Voice of the Voiceless, and it's run by Minnow Jones. And this program, it takes young ladies who've lost kids through violence, gang violence or violence, and we give them counseling, you know, and because a lot of times, these African-American citizens are affected by these violence. Once they lose a loved one, they go through a lot of problems, you know, depression and so on and so forth. So this facility will be able to give counseling to some of those the people that lose loved ones through gang violence. We also want to focus on youth recreation facilities, programs for our youth as well. Another program that we have is called Mentors in Motion. We take at-risk youth between the ages of 7 through 13, and we provide, we show them how to open businesses up. We show them about music, computer skills, and so on and so forth. That's one of our programs that we have up under our Beloved Streets umbrella. I'm going to give you a brief history on how Beloved Streets came about and how the vision of Beloved Streets came. It all started back in 2004. I was a postal worker, as you said once earlier, I was a postal worker, 20-year veteran at the Postal Service. And one of my routes carried me along Dr. Martin Luther King Street and a street called Delmore. Okay, Delmore is like approximately a mile away from Martin Luther King Street here in St. Louis. Delmore is a prime example of what gentrification is. It used to be called the Delmore Divide. Once you cross over Delmore, you crossing over to prosperity, so to speak. And so they took Delmore Street here in St. Louis, displaced all the people that were along the Delmore corridor, and basically moved them out to the suburbs. And right now, if you look at the corridor of Delmore, it's thriving right now. It's businesses. I mean, you have restaurants. This street right here could be a prime example of what Martin Luther King Street should look like, because it's only a mile away. And you've been here to St. Louis, so you already know exactly what I'm talking about. So a mile away from Delmore, I was delivering my mail, and I just looked at the street sign, and it said Dr. Martin Luther King. At the same time, I'm looking at abandoned buildings, drugs being sold right in front of my face, prostitution. It just didn't correlate with what Dr. King stood for. I mean, we all know Dr. King was one of my heroes growing up here in St. Louis. I mean, he's quite sure everyone's on this panel hero, so to speak. So it kind of intrigued me. I'm like, wow, I wonder is this going on like this all over the country? One reason that I thought about it is because I heard about the joke that Chris Rock, it's a famous joke that Chris Rock made back in the day. He said, if you're on a Dr. King Street, you better run. You know, he kind of made light of a serious situation, you know. So I said, well, you know, I want to find out if it's like that. So over the next 5 years, I traveled various MLK streets across the country. And we've been to Houston, Dallas, Miami, Milwaukee, Newark, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, so on and so forth, maybe over 25, 30 cities. And I filmed and documented these streets. And I found out the majority of them are in the same type of situation our MLK Street is. It lacks a lot of economic development on these streets. So we formed a nonprofit. We called it Beloved Streets for America because Martin Luther King always spoke about beloved communities. And before his untimely death, he was talking about economics and before he was assassinated. So we formed a nonprofit. We called it Beloved Streets of America. And it's a national initiative that we have here. It's not just in St. Louis. Our mission is national initiative. So we want to start here in St. Louis, but like I said, it's over 900 streets that needs development. You have some success stories out there in Milwaukee, some guys up there doing some great work, and in some other cities out there. But our whole thing is to revitalize these streets that's been placed on Dr. King's legacy. I'm going to talk about some of the gentrification, what's going on with the gentrification here in St. Louis. I'm going to start on the north St. Louis, the north side of St. Louis. That's 95% African American. It's plagued by abandoned buildings and violence and so on and so forth. So a lot of these white developers, they've came in and snatched a lot of this property up right now, and they're just kind of like sitting on it right now. And in the meantime, it pushed a lot of our community out to the suburbs in North County here in St. Louis. And so you have a lot of these abandoned buildings that's there, but when you go to try to purchase them, they're already purchased by these developers, these rich developers that came in and basically snatched up a majority of this property that's out here. So St. Louis is, like the majority of these Midwestern cities, is going through a huge gentrification period. You know, we've lost 200,000 residents. We used to be a city of over 650,000 back in 1970. We're down up under almost 300,000 right now. And the majority of the residents have moved out. They pushed further out to the suburbs into the county area. Some of our struggles that we're going through here in St. Louis is the lack of funding, which everyone is talking about on this panel. I think we need to come collectively with a plan to go after federal dollars that's out there in Washington, D.C., collectively showing our strength as a collective unit. And it's power in numbers. If we can go to them and with a legitimate plan, it's billions of dollars that's out there. So that's one of our problems that we've been faced with is the lack of funding. You have a lot of grassroots organizations that's out there, and they have great ideas, but they can only sustain themselves for so long, you know, without them collapsing. So we actually have 30 businesses that signed and said, hey, if we can get the funding, they'll be willing to relocate on Martin Luther King Street. I mean, these are all type of business, from security firms to janitorial businesses, and they are willing to relocate. But like I said, without the proper funding, these businesses, they go under, you know. So another thing is navigating through the political system here in St. Louis. It's kind of tough. I don't know how these other cities are set up, but St. Louis, our Martin Luther King Street, you have to go through 6 different aldermen along this corridor. Our Martin Luther King Street is 6.5 miles long. And to get anything done, you have to go through 6 different personalities and talk to 6 different aldermen just to get something done. And a lot of times, that'd be the problem of getting things done, because you have so many different personalities working against you. You might have somebody that just don't like you for any type of particular reason, you know. So that's been a battle, just navigating through the political system. Also, the dollars that comes through the city needs to be accounted for. There's $700 million right there down in the city of St. Louis that's sitting there. And those dollars need to be accounted for, because at the end of the day, there's not going to be any really coming through these impoverished neighborhoods, and there's not going to be anything to show for it, and nobody held accountable for that situation. So lastly, I want to speak on some of our first phase. I didn't bring a PowerPoint, but I can talk about it and you can get a visual of what we're doing here in St. Louis. Our first phase consists of a grocery store. Like I said, it's a food desert. This grocery store will provide organically grown vegetables and fruits that we are growing our own. We're growing them ourselves, and we're going to utilize them at the grocery store, actually at the corner of Martin Luther King and Hamilton. Dr. Daniels, if you can remember where our office was on Martin Luther King and Hamilton, it's directly across the street from where the office was. Okay, where the office was, we're going to open up a culinary school / cafe, because it's nowhere for the residents over there to even get on the internet. It'll be sort of like a Starbucks atmosphere where you can come in and get on your computer as well. And you can, we're going to be teaching culinary classes as well next to to there. So also next to that will be the technology center, where we can get a lot of these organizations in this one particular building, and we can share information, network, and so on and so forth. So those are our plans right now with our first phase that we have here on Dr. Martin Luther King Street here in St. Louis. We hope to partner with East St. Louis as well. And once we do that partnership, this will be the longest MLK Street in the country, because our MLK Street actually, once you cross the bridge, you connect right to their MLK Street over there in East St. Louis. And this will be the longest MLK Street in the country. So we're actually working with East St. Louis, Illinois as well to try to make this a regional plan for the country. So those are some of the plans that we have here in St. Louis. And we're looking forward to partnering with some of the great minds that's on this panel. And we're going to take it from there. And thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Melvin. And thank you for taking up the challenge. You know, you could have, a whole lot of people gripe and complain, and the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And you certainly took that step. And I've been there, I've seen it. I've seen the disparity between these two streets. You know, I've been doing the best I can to identify with this, and there's some hope. Marc Morial, the president of the Urban League, is very intensely interested in this. I had a conversation recently, a brief one, I've got to follow through it, with Martin Luther King III. I'll be going to Atlanta in a couple of weeks. I hope to meet with him to get his blessing on it, because there are funds within the federal government now in the transportation department, which should make the Martin Luther King Beloved Streets initiative come to life. And it would benefit a whole lot of communities. So we're going to try to score that victory. And whenever this comes to be, we're going to make sure that Melvin White is standing right there, because a lot of times what happens is the innovators and the people who created get brushed aside, so politicians and everybody else can stand there and act as if they were the ones who innovated. We're not going to let that happen. Right. So now, sisters and brothers and friends, wow, what extraordinary presentations that we've heard. And so now what we want to do is we want to take, we have about 15 minutes or so for comments, and we don't necessarily have to have questions. People can make comments. We want to continue to say that people have said, do we have a chapter here, an affiliation there? That's what we're trying to do. We want to bring everybody in, people who are working on this issue from different places. We want to bring them in to cross-fertilize and connect and build out, a movement really around the state of emergency that we say is without urgency right now, but we want to create that urgency. So I don't know whether Tiana or I guess Louis or someone is going to post the question, or so I can read it, or tell me how I'm supposed to proceed. I'm looking to my team to tell me what I should do next in terms of the comments and the questions.
Okay, Dr. D, I'm lifting up this question from Manira Bomani. If you'd like to take yourself off of mute and lift your question up for the room this evening. And while we have the tech team assisting to get Manira off of mute, I will lift her question that she shared in the Q&A. And it reads, housing ends homelessness, not shelters and hotels. Newark needs 16,000 and more housing units for low-income residents. What plans does the city of Newark have to address Newark housing crisis? What is the city of Newark's building on the public land at 79 Newark Street where the homeless containers are?
Okay, can we get maybe Vivian can give a quick response to that. We want to have quick questions and as succinct responses as we can. We can do some follow-up, but Vivian, you have the floor.
Okay. So I can't really speak for the city of Newark, so specifically around their plans, but I know there's a land bank. They're undertaking a few initiatives to increase the availability of affordable housing. There are several affordable housing projects in the queue of development that are 100% affordable. So I know that there is effort to address it, specifically around the site that you're questioning. I don't know the specific plans because it's not an urban league project, but I do know that Invest Newark had that the city started the land bank, the first land bank in the state, and they've gotten 80 properties and already have been distributing them, and they're looking for 80 more in the month of April. So, potentially maybe through the land bank, that might be an option to consider, but if there's a specific question, you certainly could contact me. I'll put my contact information in the chat, and I can help you to connect to, housing folks here in the city.
Okay, let's go to the next one, Louis.
Thank you. And a quick question that I wanted to lift up that actually some of our one of our panelists already answered, but I'd like to lift it up so everyone else can put eyes and ears to it. Thank you, Sister Assata, for answering this question. And it reads from Janet Howard. What are the presenters' thoughts about empowering communities and engaging elected officials and financial entities to support housing co-ops, especially in the South?
Okay.
I'll just say, I said I'm supportive of it. We're working with the neighborhood choice grant. And I think, one of the things that we didn't initially start doing here in Houston, because we really didn't have the resources, was to really do in-depth community organizing, right? So we started with no funds, just residents coming together, talking about what we wanted. I think cooperatives, I know cooperatives allow you to do that deep organizing, right? It allows you to build that knowledge. And also it allows you to seize community ownership. So I think thinking about conversion of housing, right? How do you convert market rate housing to cooperative housing? How do you convert already existing naturally occurring affordable housing into cooperatives? But again, you've got to really educate and really build the political base of the community to begin to make those demands, right? So residents demanding to share housing, and us also incubating the Urban League, other entities that are in development, offer cooperative housing as an option. And I want to say this about the land trust. This is really important. The beauty of our community land trust was the agreement with the taxing authority, right? Because if you start as an affordable housing and the neighborhood appreciates, right, that will not be permanently affordable because the property values and the property taxes will make it unaffordable. So we got the taxing entity to tax on the improvement and not on the land, which is speculative, right? And so you just have to think through these models very carefully. But again, people who do housing should be offering, right? Not offering cooperative housing as an option in this individualistic model, which puts too much pressure on families in a neighborhood, in economies that are really not on their side.
Okay, all right, Louis, next question, please.
Thank you. And we're going to try to take a comment or a question rather from one of our audience participants. Like to go to Sister Melody. Sister Melody, you have the floor if you'd like to put yourself asking you to unmute and share your question with us.
Are we having difficulty unmuting people? Because I saw a complaint earlier from someone who said that they were muted before they could ask the question. So is it we having a technical glitch or something here?
Seems like we're having a little issue with Miss Melody. Let's go to Mr. Richard Wright. Mr. Wright.
Hello.
Okay, there we go, Miss Melody. Your
okay,
question, please.
Go ahead, Melody.
Yes, good afternoon to the panel and everyone else tonight. I'm speaking on behalf of Miami, Florida-Dade County, in behalf of the public housing. And most of us are being pushed out. We're more like Section A, that we can't afford to pay the rent anymore, even though you have vouchers and the renters have went extremely over the voucher rent, and there's nothing no one can do. So I'm trying to find out, anyone on the panel have any information on how could we get help with that? Because they are not taking our vouchers. They're trying to push us out to inner city areas to send us like to Homestead, if anyone familiar with that. So it's like a real crisis here in Miami, in the pandemic area with mostly African Americans, not Hispanics.
So that's sort of a generalized phenomenon. I've heard about this phenomenon of the vouchers no longer being sufficient. In fact, it seems as if they're trying to get rid of them altogether. Anybody want to just address that? Camryn, I see you shaking your head. You want to speak to that problem? Thanks.
I mean, I don't have a solution.
You can remute yourself, Melanie.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult in North Carolina because we do not have rent control or exclusionary. It's against the law. And so we're having issues here with this phenomenon of what's happening is the lack of accepting the vouchers. And so what we're trying to do actually is what Durham is trying to do, because we have somebody on our team that's kind of extensively looked at some of the housing code, and Dr. Danielle Spurlock, who I said is in the audience, she's kind of looked at this as well, trying to push our municipality because we are at the point, we are such a high deficit of affordable housing. And then on top of it, we have a huge amount of evictions that are taking place currently. And so what we're trying to push the city or begin conversations with directly impacted folk, us coming together and having the city actually take some of this funding and create nice amounts of robust affordable housing in the community and leaving it rent controlled, but it has to be created by the city or the county. It cannot be created. The city cannot require affordable housing components for any developers or anything, because that's against North Carolina state law and statute. And so, but the city and the municipalities can create permanently affordable housing. And we do not want it actually governed by the current housing authority, because there is an issue right now with the current housing authority director, who is actually given a bid to a white-owned developer outside of the community to one of our public housing properties that had been totally fallen down, and now they're trying to redevelop it. And we already had one of our professors at North Carolina Central with a team of folks wanting to redevelop in the Hayti community for the Black community, both housing and marketplace economic development, and they were totally overlooked for these white developers. So, and our housing authority is governed and run by someone Black. And so, this is part of the problem. It's just, people are doing what's in the best interest of the mighty dollar, what makes their jobs easier, but it's not at the benefit of the community. And so, yeah, it's a very complex. In North Carolina, our hands are tied by the legislature in so much of that inclusionary zoning and affordable housing. And they've done that on purpose. They've done that on purpose.
I think we should flag this. This is an issue, it seems, that we should flag. And it just occurs to me that, and I don't know what could be done about it, but it seems that we do have the Department of Housing and Urban Development is former Congresswoman Marsha Fudge from Cleveland. And I don't know the degree to which these issues are being brought to her attention, or whether or not HUD can do anything about it. I don't know. I'm just saying that it seems like one of those issues we need to flag in terms of what potentially could be done. Let's go to Richard Wright for the last comment. Richard, if we could unmute Richard, or Richard, if you could unmute yourself, you have the floor. Richard, can you unmute yourself? Richard Wright. Okay, Louis, is there one more? Someone else? Because Richard seems to not be able to unmute himself.
Well,
see, there's Kathy. Kathy is, can we recognize Kathy? Kathy, can you unmute? Kathy, can you unmute yourself? Oh, it looks like people are having difficulty unmuting themselves. Or there seems to be.
Let's go to Manira then. I think Manira had another question.
Well, I don't, we've already had one from, I think we've had one from her, right?
Dr. Daniels,
Yeah, but I
while we're
wasn't
working
able-
on the mute. Can
Hello?
I just say,
Yeah, she,
I want to flag what Camryn keeps talking about, because I think we need to flag what Bell Hooks said, the Black bourgeoisie convincing us that Black capitalism is liberation. I really want to flag this, right? Because this is an issue that we've got to contend with, because it's a false hearing. So the Black developer will come to us, the Black realtor will come to us, right? And they will make friendly with us. And while we're working hard, fighting the good fight, they're making the deal in the back. And we've got to take this on head on. We got to be very clear. We can't be like the sister Issa talking about, I'm rooting for everybody Black. No. We can't do that. That's problematic.
Gotta have a covenant.
People that have an agenda. And so when we get together, we need to talk about how the Black, bourgeoisie is profiting and selling the community and exploiting the Black community to their advantage. And cheering up another Black billionaire is not getting us there. So Sister Camryn has said it several times. Sister Camryn, I'm on your side. That's who we need to hold accountable. And if we can't stop them, they don't get entry into our community. They don't get celebrated in the awards. They don't get acknowledged. They better cross the street when they see us coming. And I mean that because if we can't hold space in our own community, we can't hold other people accountable. We can't hold our own people accountable. So we've got to change this narrative.
Right. All right. Okay. Well, let me say that this has been a very, very, very rich conversation. We thank our panelists. Let's give them a virtual hand clap and applause for the extraordinary contributions. And we thank all of you for taking time out on this 55th anniversary of Dr. King's Beyond Vietnam, a time to break silence speech in order to be with us, and on the occasion, the memorial of his martyrdom, to not talk about the morbidity of his assassination, but to talk in terms of vision and courage and the audacity to talk about the ability to liberate and claim to take back our communities. And so as we close, I want to just reiterate the vision of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. And we've been pretty dogged about this, pretty stubborn about this, even when we had some of our colleagues and friends who were in disbelief that we would continue. Don't ever doubt the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. We really, really, really are seriously committed to this proposition. And so what we want to do is, again, if you in the chat will be posted a way that you can sign up. We've been inviting people to join the fight. We want to get your information, your name, your organization, and your city, because we want to bring more and more people into the network of this conversation. Our next goal will be, and we'll be in touch with you about it, we're going to identify a time for a virtual mini conference. Rather than 2 hours, we may be talking about 6 hours, but an opportunity for people to get into breakout rooms and to interface with each other and share experiences and to begin to build out this network in a very powerful way. Because at the end of the day, we do want to have a resource center where people can come and they can learn and they can share and learn. I say share and learn and share, because it's a reciprocal kind of process. And also then to have this network that we'll build out that will be in fact moving to continue this struggle. And you've seen the incredible models, the incredible work that's being done. We just need to connect it, and some of it is already being connected. Assata says she's on her way on a plane right now, on her way to Baltimore. And we had some sisters and brothers from Baltimore before who joined us. I don't know all who's joined us this time, but we want to reach out to and bring them back into the fold. We are witnessing the vanishing chocolate cities. We had some people in Washington, D.C. that were filing lawsuits and whatever. We want to bring all of that talent and that energy and that vision back into the fold. So again, we say thank you so much for joining us. Again, go to the chat and sign up and make your contributions. We're gathering up all of the comments that were being made because they were also inspirational. And, there's room for criticism and discussion and debate. That's all a part of the process. But at the end of the day, It is a luta continua. It is the struggle continued. And as Assata said, Richards laid out, she quoted one of my favorite revolutionaries, and that is Amilcar Cabral. That is, the people do not struggle for ideas alone, but for a improvement in their material condition. And so we have to fight with them, alongside of them, and have an improvement of their material condition. And some of that, Brother Melvin, is going to be with those MLK streets all across this country as we begin to deliver and keep hope alive. And you'll be surprised what some of those elected officials will do when they'll be able to stick out their chest and say, look what I helped deliver to the community.
Right.
And you know, we just act like they was with us all the time, because we just keep stepping. So thank you so much. We appreciate you so much. And we'll see you in short order in terms of what the next steps are.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Good evening, and thank you so much.
Take care, y'all.